Well, you know, a lot of us are pretty thrilled that the weather is such as it is. My hand's in the air. But it kind of makes you wonder. In fact, I was wondering about it just looking around my own yard. And a couple of folks last night over at the Pumpkin Soiree were talking about what they see in terms of what should be typical fall in their yards and around the region. And so it seemed apropos to ask Bob Coward to stop by and talk to us a little bit about that. Of course, Bob on The Cowardly Gardener on The Garden Show on Saturdays all spring and summer on WBCK. And he even comes back when it's not spring and summer.
That's right.
And that's okay. Hi, Bob.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, it was a late night.
It was a late night. Were you watching till the end?
I did. Unfortunately, I was about dozing and drooling in the chair when it finally got done, but yes.
I came home from the big soiree last night and thought, I'm not even going to turn it on because I won't be able to pull myself away from it. So,
well, I can make a weather prediction for you right now.
Okay.
Over Chicago this winter, it's actually going to be sunny and 80 with low winds all the way through the first part of January.
Can we move there for now?
I don't think there's any room. There's so many people there.
Right. Everybody's there right now because, well, at least we in spirit, but we'd like to be there.
Yeah, somewhere Harry Carey's having a, Budweiser and saying, holy cow.
That's right. That's right. You know, just looking around and at what's going on in my yard, I have an ornamental cherry tree, and those leaves are just as green as they were in June. What is this? Does this warm weather create confusion?
Well, it may create confusion for you. The biggest problem is we really haven't had a killing freeze.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had a couple of frosts, but you know, I mean, I've seen places where there's just a lot of stuff like peppers and things like that are still quite lively.
Well, yeah.
And until you get a killing freeze, a lot of these plants, cherries are one, and even like some of the flowering pears and some of those type of plants, they don't even start to even think about changing color or dropping their leaves until we get a killing freeze. And I'm not necessarily seeing that. They're talking maybe Friday night,
yes,
maybe down to 32, but that, to me, a killing freeze is like 25 degrees.
Right. You've really got to get below freezing.
But I tell you, one of the things that's nice about this is because of the weather being so warm like this, still a great time to plant stuff. I mean, fall is the best time to plant things as a general rule anyway. So if you want to plant perennials or trees or shrubs or any of that kind of stuff, it's great because as long as the soil temperature is above about 35 degrees, those type of plants still are growing roots. They actually, this time of year, your grass and trees and all that stuff actually grow the most amount of roots during the whole entire year right now. So as long as we got warm temperatures like this, that top may be losing its leaves, but the bottom's still going.
And this is a good time to throw a little seed down, is it?
Well, as far as doing, if you got a little tiny area for grass seed, go ahead and do it. But typically, I'm not real fond of doing it much after about the first week of October because, you know, most years you really don't have a lot of time for it to come up. But, I mean, if you got a spot that's, 10 by 10 or something, it's only going to cost you a couple bucks for grass seed, go for it.
Give it a shot.
Yeah, you aren't going to lose much, I mean, if the birds or mice or whatever eat your seed up before next spring, you haven't really lost much. But chances are good if the weather stays warm, it may start to sprout, and then next spring you may have something.
Yeah. I had a big patch in my yard that I had seed put down this year, and they did it in July, and I thought, man, this is going to be kind of tough because it's hot.
Yes.
Didn't matter. Grew right in. They put the hay over it, kept watering it. It just filled right in like nothing.
Straw.
Yeah. Or, hay, whatever, straw, whatever it is.
There's an easy way to remember.
Okay.
Hay is for feeding.
Yes.
Straw is for seeding.
And it rhymes, which helps.
That's right. Makes it easy for somebody like you.
Somebody like me.
Yes.
Like,
and alliterative type of guy like you.
That's right. So it worked out fine. I was a little worried it'd be too hot, but it was okay.
Typically it is, too. I mean, we had, and actually in July this year, we had a real drought going up to that point. And, of course, when I was on the garden show in May and June, it was water.
Right.
Then we got into late July, August, and we had about a 3-week stretch there where we had about 12 inches of rain in roughly 3 weeks. Now we're back to a little bit more common seasonal type rain pattern.
Right.
But even still, a lot of those trees and shrubs and some of those things that were kind of struggling back in the early spring really should be fertilized at this time of year because, they just were really kind of having a hard time of it. And if you can give them a little shot of fertilizer, they'll come out of it next spring and should do really well.
Bob Coward is here, a little garden show during the week on WBCK. I guess we should be talking on the air. We've been chattering away here. Bob Coward is here on WBCK on Thursday.
That's what happens with Nico on Saturday.
We just get going and going and going.
That's right.
I was talking about this grass that I had planted in the backyard in an area that was once a garden. And so, the grass seed was growing, but there was still some garden growth coming through. And at first I got a little concerned about that. And it really didn't matter. If you just keep cutting that, it works its way.
That's right. And you still probably have time with the warmer weather. If you want to do a treatment for the weeds, you can certainly hit those broadleaf weeds right now. The broadleaf weed killer really works very well at this time of year because it's a translocated herbicide, meaning it's absorbed through the foliage and travels down and kills the roots. And if you think about it, the weeds are much like your trees. They're sending all their energy to their roots for fall, for storage. So if you put an herbicide on that travels down and kills the root, it works a lot quicker and a lot better. So a lot of people do all their weed control on that in the summer months or in the spring, and they really should be doing it in the fall, and you have a way better result, and you won't have those dandelions blooming in April.
And since they are working toward the root now, it's like a super highway.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. And that's a great way to do it.
So you talked about planting shrubs and things. What else should we be planting right now?
Well, one of the big things that people should be putting in right now is fall bulbs. I always like to plant daffodils this time of year, and then usually about tax day next year, those daffodils are blooming. So a lot of the places that sell them actually are starting to put them on sale, so you can probably get them for a little bit less money than normally would, and still plenty of time to plant them. The ground is nice and warm. I was planting a Japanese maple yesterday, and the soil is probably 55, 60 degrees right now. So it's very, very warm. Everything will take and do really, really well. So great time to plant stuff.
I have a lot of daylilies in my yard, and they keep blooming. They keep popping up.
Yep.
They're not confused, are they? It's just warm, and they're okay with it.
They're okay with it, and they'll bloom as long as, we have any 60 or 70-degree days. They're going to keep right on going for the next 2 or 3 weeks. The long-range forecast that I'm seeing through most of the end of November is above normal temperatures, so I think we're going to stay like this for a while. I think what's going to happen, and we've seen this happen in years past, we're going to go along, and it's going to be 70 degrees or 60 degrees one day, and then all of a sudden they're going to say, oh, we're going to have a 19-degree night, and then it's going to snow, and that's going to be it.
Yeah, we're going to get socked in the kisser.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be an exceptionally bad winter. That's just my take on the whole thing. I think we're going to have maybe normal snowfall. Normally we get about 70 inches of snow in this area. I think we're probably going to be slightly below or maybe right around normal snowfall.
I want to talk about that and find out what indicators are giving you that thought. Meanwhile, somebody's asking, actually it's Tim, what about vegetable planting? Can you plant vegetables at this time of year?
Basically, the main thing that people would be planting right now would be like spinach. A lot of people will do spinach and even kale, some of the greens you can plant right now. And then once they come up, just cover them up with straw or leaves and let them sit all winter and then pull that stuff back off in February. And you can have a pretty nice little crop next spring.
Straw, not hay.
Yes. Hay is for feeding to your horse.
Hay is for horses, as my dad likes to say.
That's right.
I won't finish that sentence.
That's right.
All right, 8:20. We'll talk more about what Bob thinks about the winter here in just a second on WBCK. WBCK, Bob Coward with us here on a special weekday appearance for a few more minutes. Of course, Garden Show, Spring and Summer, Saturdays on WBCK. Ask Bob thereafter on Saturday mornings as well. So you're thinking this is going to be a normal-ish kind of snowfall winter.
Yep, and probably not that excessively cold, if I had to make my guess.
Right.
Now, of course, I'm not a meteorologist, but I did once play one on TV, but that's about as good as anybody can get.
You still get royalties for that?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I found was very interesting this year is, and I kind of watched the critters in the world, and
right.
One of the things that I found really weird this year was I've been feeding hummingbirds darn near my whole life.
Yeah.
You can almost set your watch by the hummingbirds. They come back to my house on May 5th. They typically leave on September 27th. This year, for some reason, they left on October 4th. Now, one of the explanations that I have, actually two explanations, there was actually a hurricane. Hurricane Matthew was coming ashore, so maybe somehow they could sense that was happening, and that's why they didn't leave. Or we're going to have a very late arriving winter. And that might be why. Because typically when they go, it's because of their eyes. They get the daylight hours and they go. I just saw day before yesterday my first slate-colored junco. Now, those are also known as snowbirds. A lot of people call them snowbirds. So typically when you see those, you can count about 3 weeks forward, and that's when you're going to get your first snow.
Okay.
So if you look at that, then probably right around Thanksgiving we might get a snow, which is not uncommon. And I also saw the very same day, I saw a whole flock of cedar waxwings in my yard. And they were hung around for a minute, and then they headed south. So, you know, the birds are making their trip. So I think we're going to probably see some snow right around Thanksgiving, 1st of December. Probably not so much snowy at the first part of December, but then early to mid-January be kind of snowy. And then after that, it'll be kind of warm in February and March. Not excessively warm, but not overly snowy.
Well, about 10 years ago, that was the norm. That description.
Yes, and that is pretty much the description. And we typically get about 70 inches of snow in this area, so I think if we get somewhere around 60, I think that'll probably be pretty good.
I had somebody say to me, I don't know, it's going to be really snowy. The lake is really warm, and it's staying warm, and that lake effect's going to kick up. How does that factor into your snowbird scenario?
Well, I think that, you know, that's as good of a story as what I have. So, but the whole key to having lake effect snow is you need to have northerly winds that are fairly strong in order for that to work. And if we don't have a lot of northerly winds, that may not be that big of an issue. So if it's going to be purely determined on the jet stream, El Nino last year has faded away. Now we're in a La Nina situation, so it's a very light one. So it's probably going to be just an oscillating jet stream back and forth. So we may have times where we get 8 inches of snow one day, and then it warms back up a little bit and kind of comes and goes.
Makes it a little more palatable to get where you need to go and stuff like that.
That's right.
What about trimming? I was noticing my fruit trees in the yard are still hanging on to some leaves, and so I haven't pruned them. You've told me prune and then prune.
Yep.
Because you might think you're pruning too much, but that's okay.
Yep.
A couple of them are done with leaves, so I did those, but I haven't done the others yet. If they still have leaves, you should wait, right?
Well, you know, once they get down to about half their leaves gone, especially apples, you can go ahead and do it. I mean, the last, 2 feet of the branches typically are going to hold on to those leaves until darn near January because that's just what they do. But typically, if you do it after we've had a good freeze, which hopefully sometime in the next week or so we'll do it, you'll probably find they'll do pretty good. I actually have some fruit trees I'm pruning this weekend for somebody, so, it's getting pretty close to time. But when you do it, and I've told many people this, when you prune your fruit trees, the thing to remember is that what you're doing is you're reducing the number of blossoms. And that sounds bad, but really what it does is it reduces the number of apples, which still sounds bad. But if you think about it, instead of having 10,000 little tiny apples that are all full of worms, you get 150 great big apples that are probably a lot better. So that's why you prune. And I always tell people, if you really want to see how to do it, go to somewhere like Gull Meadow Farms now and look at what the trees look like now, and then drive back by there in January after they pruned them, and you just go, oh my God, I can't believe how much they took off there. But these guys are in the business and they do it commercially, so they know what they're doing. And you really have to take off about 2/3 of your tree in order to get a good crop. You're trying to get airflow in there and reduce those blossoms.
I read, too, that you want to try to shape it like a bush, sort of roundish. Is that your thought?
No, you always, on most all fruit trees, you're trying to prune to branches that grow sideways, and you want the center part open like a vase or a candelabra. You try to let sunlight in the middle and grow to a sideways branch because upward growing branches generally don't produce fruit very well. So pear trees are notorious for growing straight up, so you want to try to prune those to sideways branches. Apples do that also, but if you can grow to sideways branches and then thin out the middle and any crisscrossers so you get sunlight in the middle, that'll reduce disease and allow those fruit to ripen better.
All right. You're right about the pear trees. I have one of those, too, and it grows right up the center.
Yes, and you want to take that stuff out of there, and if you look, you'll see branches that are growing sideways, and try to trim to those and reduce the number of branches that are on there so you get fewer blossoms and bigger fruit.
And at this time of year, you might think that doing so with still a little bit of warmth just prompts them to grow, but that's not the case.
No, there's enough cooler nights and the daylight hours are short enough where they're going dormant right now. But see, the thing is, when you prune at this time of year, you put all the strength into those remaining buds, so that actually strengthens the tree for next year. So when it comes out of the winter, it takes right off and blooms and does a good job.
Love it. Bob, we look forward to you on Saturdays.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys then.
All right. Bob Coward, Saturdays at 8 on WBCK.